is a narration of the Associated Students of Portland State University's Constitution for the academic year 2022 to 2023. Preamble. We, the Associated Students of Portland State University, or ASPSU, are committed to promoting the social, cultural, educational, and physical development and health of Portland State University, or PSU, students, and the advancement of our common and individual interests, both within and without the university, thereby establishing this Constitution to accomplish the following. To facilitate formal means of communication and interaction among students, student organizations, faculty, and university administration. To advocate for and represent the interests of students before internal and external bodies, including providing for student representation and participation on university committees. To provide support and services not offered by other divisions of the university. To provide a process for students to fully participate in the allocation of incidental student fees as provided by Oregon Revised Statutes, the Portland State University Board of Trustees, and the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and hence, to create a strong, effective, and efficient student government. Table of Contents. The collective rights and liberties of students. Article 1, Terms and Definitions. Article 2, Name and Student Rights. Article 3, Participation. Article 4, Governance. Article 5, President and Vice President. Article 6, the Executive Cabinet. Article 7, the Senate. Article 8, the Student Fee Committee. Article 9, the Judicial Review Board. Article 10, Elections. Article 11, General Assembly. Article 12, Resignation, Recall, Impeachment, and Replacement. Article 13, Initiative and Referendum. Article 14, Amendments. The collective rights and liberties of students. 1. Student power. It is pertinent for a student government to unceasingly struggle to achieve agency for students in the university's decision-making processes. Such participation is a cornerstone of democracy. Currently, students are frequently included in advisory roles within the governance structures of the university. This can include the use and allocation of space, student fees, tuition fees, academic design and implementation, and the execution of the university's values. We should shift from advisors to agents in our education. 2. Student solidarity. Internal. Student government should work in collaboration and in solidarity with other stakeholders in the university system. We should engage in solidarity and collaboration with student groups, faculty unions, staff unions, and the Faculty Senate. External. Student governments should seek to mutually uplift and work with student governments and advocates for student power, and to do so across the state, nation, and world. We should also grow and develop a student solidarity network to communicate about issues, events, and opportunities for students to speak up statewide. We should provide information in solidarity for students' issues locally and internationally. We should engage in solidarity and collaboration with students across the state, across the nation, and across the world. 3. Student success. A crucial element in promoting student success requires us to analyze the conditions students are currently experiencing and compare it to students' historical conditions, and then consider our ideal educational framework. We have a vision with which to drive our efforts for reforms now, and with the intended goal of not seeing these reforms as the end of our work. We should coordinate our work to consistently reduce students' economic, social, and cultural burdens in attaining an education. The following 7 points describe areas of student success where we can effectively fight to uplift the condition of our education. 4. Work. Living wage. Students on our campuses should not work for less than a living wage. Our university cannot serve the city if we treat our students in a manner that deprives them of providing for themselves. Unionization. Student workers should be able to organize in their workplaces to ensure fair and equitable contracts and working conditions on our campus. As a student government, we can take a leading role in ensuring that students' rights as workers are upheld. 5. Tuition. The access we receive to information regarding the university's financial administration should be utilized to effect change through access of information. We should provide students with the means to access resources and services that could lower their tuition. If we are to inform students about their tuition process conditions, we should advocate to minimize the significant rise in tuition. 6. Administration. Students and faculty should have the right to have agency in their own curriculum. Students are best prepared to know what they want from their education. Educators are best prepared to know what they can provide. The utilization of space, property, and university policies should be decided democratically by all university stakeholders. We advocate for a more democratic model that would increase the weight of input from students, faculty, and staff in decision-making processes and shared governance of the university. 7. Culture. We should work unceasingly to not only diminish but to end the systematic oppression of all marginalized communities and identities. We advocate to abolish oppression, not only systematic reform. The ability to self-organize and develop as a community is a right for all people. We should always seek to uplift access, awareness, and development for resource centers and student groups. 8. Food. No student should go hungry in a world where food is overproduced. Improving campus food security can be achieved through collaboration with campus stakeholders, such as the PSU Food Pantry, the Committee for Improving Student Food Security, the Basic Needs Hub, and the Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative. Their efforts should be uplifted and supported by the student body. 9. Transportation. Amongst the costs for students to attend university, transportation should not be a barrier to student success. The urgency of addressing this issue is compounded by our significantly large commuter population and urban location. We should advocate to ensure that parking is free for students who already pay to attend and for faculty and staff who provide education and resources for these students. Furthermore, those who do not have the means or access to arrive with their vehicles should be provided with free public transportation access. If education is a right, so too are the means to access it. To accomplish these goals, we will collaborate with campus partners, such as the Student Sustainability Center, Transportation and Parking Services, and the Bike Hub. 10. Housing. Housing is a right. We should strive to advocate that the costs of living on or off campus are not exploitative nor unaffordable. Rather, we should ensure that we have a right to quality housing for all students, staff, and faculty, regardless of income or living situation. Article 1. Terms and definitions. 1.1. Academic quarter. The period of days beginning on the first day of a term and ending the day before the first day of the next term. 1.2. Appeal. The right held by any member of the association to challenge a judicial review board ruling, or the right held by any ASPSU officer to request reinstatement after a declaration of seat vacancy due to academic ineligibility. 1.3. Directors. The chairpersons of the standing committees of ASPSU, excluding the Student Fee Committee, the Judicial Review Board, and the Executive Cabinet. 1.4. Executive Cabinet. The ASPSU Executive Cabinet includes the President, the Vice President, the University Affairs Director, the Multicultural Affairs Director, the Equal Rights Advocacy Director, the Legislative Affairs Director, the International Affairs Director, the Sustainability Affairs Director, the Student Life Director, the Academic Affairs Director, and the Student Fee Committee Chair. 1.5. Executive Staff. The ASPSU Executive Staff includes the Chief of Staff, Executive Staff Director, the Operations Director, the Publicity and Design Director. 1.6. Firing. Any director of a director-led committee or director within Leadership Corps can be fired by the ASPSU President for reasons that are synonymous with the grounds of impeachment under Article 1 Terms and Definitions. Any ASPSU member who is fired has the right to appeal within the Judicial Review Board through the process outlined in Article 5.10.1. 1.7. General Assembly. A public forum chaired by the Senate pro tempore, hosted by ASPSU, where the public is invited to, but not limited to, ask questions, provide comments, and propose resolutions for the ASPSU Senate to deliberate at the next scheduled Senate meeting. 1.8. Governing Bodies. The governing bodies of ASPSU include the Judicial Review Board, the Senate Standing Committees, and any subcommittees of these bodies authorized to make binding decisions without approval from a parent body. 1.9. Governing Documents. The ASPSU Constitution, Senate Bylaws, Judicial Review Board Bylaws, and guidelines for all ASPSU governing bodies, which include or may not include the Roberts Rules of Order. 1.10. Grounds for impeachment. High crimes, treason, or other misdemeanors, as defined in the United States Constitution. It also includes, but is not limited to, flagrant and egregious non-fulfillment of duties, job responsibilities, or any other power outlined in this Constitution or additional governing documents, misuse of student funds, severe violations of the PSU Student Code of Conduct. 1.11. Impeachment. The process by which an ASPSU officer is removed through Senate trial, initiated by the Judicial Review Board via articles of impeachment submitted to them. 1.12. Officer. An ASPSU officer is any student serving on a governing body of ASPSU or as a member of the executive staff. 1.13. Opinion. A published document that details the reasoning behind a Judicial Review Board ruling. 1.14. Quorum. A quorum consists of a 50% plus 1 of the total voting seats for the body in question. For example, if a governing body has 10 voting members, a quorum would be 5 plus 1, therefore 6 voting members. 1.15 Referendum. A vote by the student body on a question posed by the student body, or a recall or initiative petition. 1.16 Regularly scheduled meeting. A regularly scheduled meeting of the Senate is defined as meetings planned at the beginning of the academic term. 1.17 Resolution. Any formal decision, determination, or expression of the sentiment of the Student Senate, excluding Senate expenditures, revisions of bylaws, and confirmation decisions. 1.18 Seat vacancy. An administrative process in which the seat held by an ASPSU officer is declared vacant due to failure to meet and maintain minimum academic eligibility requirements. 1.19 Senate pro tempore. The interim Senate chair, who serves when the vice president is unable to facilitate Senate, is a pre-designated member of the Senate that is chosen and confirmed by a 2/3 majority by the second fall Senate meeting. 1.20 Special Senate meeting. A special Senate meeting is defined as a meeting that was not scheduled at the beginning of the academic term, however, called following Article 7.12. 1.21 Standing Committees. Such include the Student Fee Committee, the Executive Cabinet, the Legislative Affairs Committee, the Multicultural Affairs Committee, the University Affairs Committee, the Academic Affairs Committee, the Sustainability Affairs Committee, the Student Life Committee, the Equal Rights Advocacy Committee, and the International Affairs Committee. Do note, one of these committees was renamed to Inclusion and Access Committee. 1.22 Term limit. The limitation of time spent in the office is 18 academic quarters, excluding summer academic quarters for any combination of officer positions. 1.23 Term of office. June 1st to May 31st. Article 2. Name and student rights. 2.1 This organization shall be known as the Associated Students of Portland State University, otherwise known as ASPSU. 2.2 ASPSU cannot make any rule nor take any action in violation of federal, state, or local law. 2.3 Access to activities, supported in whole or in part, through mandatory student incidental fees, including activities of ASPSU, must not be denied for any reason, including but not limited to age, disability, national origin, race, color, ethnicity, marital status, veteran status, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, political view, or any other basis protected by federal, state, or local law or university policy. 2.4 through policies, procedures, or practices. ASPSU shall not discriminate from participation, deny benefits, nor otherwise subject an individual or group of individuals to different treatment based on protected class, which includes age, disability, immigration status, national origin, race, color, marital status, veteran status, religion, sex, pregnancy, including childbirth or related medical condition, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, or any other basis protected by federal, state, or local law. Article 3. Participation. 3.1. To serve as an officer in ASPSU or be an eligible candidate for elected office, each student will meet and maintain minimum academic requirements per academic quarter, as stated in this article, throughout their term of office. This information is in accordance with the Student Activities and Leadership Programs, otherwise SELP, Policy Manual, as well as the ASPSU ELSA or ELSA Terms and Conditions. 3.1.1. Those who fail to meet and maintain the minimum academic requirements per academic quarter shall have their seats declared vacant as defined in Article 1.17, but shall retain the right to appeal that seat vacancy to the Judicial Review Board. 3.1.1.1. The Judicial Review Board shall have the discretion to grant up to 2 appeals per SPSU officer in a single ASPSU term of office. 3.1.1.2. The Judicial Review Board shall not grant more than 2 consecutive appeals to a single ASPSU officer, regardless of a change in the ASPSU term of office. 3.1.1.3. The Judicial Review Board shall not grant more than 4 appeals to a single ASPSU officer during their allotted total 18 terms in office. 3.1.2. All ASPSU officers and candidates for office must meet the academic requirements in the previous term in which they attended credits, regardless of whether they are currently holding an ASPSU position. 3.1.2.1. If a student is in their first term at PSU, the previous term requirement does not apply. 3.2. Undergraduate and post-baccalaureate students must have a minimum PSU GPA of 2.50, both quarterly and cumulatively, and must complete a minimum of 6 academic credits per academic quarter, not including incompletes. Additionally, those 6 credits cannot be earned through ASPSU participation. 3.3. Graduate students must have a minimum PSU GPA of 3.0 both quarterly and cumulatively, and must complete a minimum of 5 academic credits per academic quarter, not including incompletes. Additionally, those 5 credits cannot be earned through ASPSU participation. 3.3.1. The credit requirements do not apply when graduate students are in a dissertation sequence. They already have enough on their mind. 3.4. The credit hour requirement does not apply for the summer academic quarter. However, the GPA requirement applies for any credits attempted during that summer academic quarter. 3.5. An incomplete or in-progress grade shall not be construed as a failure to meet minimum GPA requirements until it is no longer possible to complete the course per university policy. Incompletes do not count towards fulfilling the minimum credit hours, as it is outlined in Articles 3.2 and 3.3. 3.6. Failure to fulfill the duties or additional office requirements, see Articles 1.10 and 1.11. Specified in this Constitution, bylaws, guidelines, or job descriptions in a single academic quarter may be grounds for impeachment or firing. 3.7. Under university policy and the PSU Code of Conduct, any online behavior perpetrating harassment, retaliation, inflammatory or libelous language, and or hateful or violent behavior as defined in the Student Code of Conduct is a violation of official duties and may be subject for removal from office according to Articles 1.10 and 1.11. 3.7.1. If an individual is accused of inappropriate online behavior, those actions may be subject to an attention request. 3.7.2. Any unresolved matters between an ASPSU member and a member of the student body may be subject to review and discretion of the Dean of Student Life as per the Student Code of Conduct. Article 4. Governance. All meetings of ASPSU governing bodies must comply with Oregon Public Meeting Law, and the facilitator of these meetings must read a brief acknowledgement of the indigenous rights to the land presently occupied by Portland State University with proper pronunciation. 4.2. All meetings must maintain quorum and keep minutes. 4.3. All decisions must be made available to the public and secret ballots are prohibited. 4.4. All ASPSU governing bodies shall follow parliamentary procedure and refer to the latest Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, for all processes not otherwise outlined in this Constitution, bylaws, or guidelines. At the time of reading, February 12, 2023, the latest edition is the 12th edition. 4.5. All ASPSU governing bodies shall adopt bylaws or guidelines to establish operational procedures and policies not enumerated in this Constitution. In cases where the bylaws or guidelines of any governing body conflict with the ASPSU Constitution, the Constitution shall have precedence. 4.5.1. Director-led committee bylaws shall be reviewed and revised for clarity and functionality of duties and responsibilities of the office during the executive committee meetings. 4.5.2. Directors and executive staff shall collaborate in meetings to make amendments to bylaws and present their changes during the second Senate meeting of the winter term and pass with a 4/5 majority in the Senate. 4.5.3. All changes made to governing documents should be reasonable and comply with this Constitution, the PSU Code of Conduct, and any other superior governing documents. 4.5.4. The Judicial Review Board shall have final discretion to review and decide on any questions of interpretation to such documents and the changes made to them. 4.6. Except as enumerated below, revisions to governing documents may only be adopted by the ASPSU Senate during the spring academic quarter and before the end of the ASPSU term of office in that same year. A simple majority vote is required for the adoption of amendments to any governing documents. 4.6.1 The Student Fee Committee Guidelines can be altered only after the final allocation recommendations and before the end of the office's ASPSU term in the same year. 4.6.2 The Elections Committee Bylaws. An elections manual cannot be revised during an election period. 4.6.3 Amendments to governing documents, not during the spring academic quarter, and excluding SFC guidelines, may be adopted at any point during the ASPSU term of office with a 4/5 majority vote. Article 5. President and Vice President. 5.1 The ASPSU President and Vice President shall act as the official representatives of the student body. 5.2 The President shall serve on the Board of Directors of the Oregon Student Association. 5.2.1 The President shall have the power to appoint a designee from within ASPSU to serve in their place, not subject to confirmation by the Senate. 5.3 The President shall appoint PSU students to the Oregon Student Association Board of Directors, Oregon Students of Color Coalition Board, and Oregon Student Equal Rights Alliance Board, subject to the Senate's confirmation by a simple majority vote. 5.4 The President and Vice President shall propose projects and campaigns that work to fulfill ASPSU governance purposes, subject to the Senate's approval by a simple majority vote. 5.5 The President and Vice President shall deliver and present their proposed goals, projects, and campaigns by the first Senate meeting of the fall academic quarter. 5.6 The President and/or the Chief of Staff should submit nominations for all vacancies in ASPSU within the first 6 weeks of the ASPSU term of office. 5.6.1 During the year as vacancies arise, the President should submit at least one nomination to fill each vacant position within 1 month of the vacancy becoming official. 5.7 The President and Operations Director shall, with the approval of a simple majority vote of the Senate, propose and present the annual ASPSU budget to the Student Fee Committee. 5.8 The offices of the President and Vice President may be held as long as the requirements outlined in this Constitution are satisfied, for a maximum of 2 ASPSU terms of office. 5.9 The President shall make final hiring and firing decisions for executive staff and director-led committee positions, except in instances where the Judicial Review Board holds precedence in accordance with governing documents. 5.10 The President and Vice President shall have hiring and firing authority over executive staff and director-led committee positions. 5.10.1 The Judicial Review Board shall preside over an appeals process for those who wish to have their termination reviewed for lack of sufficient evidence and to have their position reinstated. 5.10.2 A 4/5 majority vote by the Judicial Review Board is needed to reinstate director-led committee positions and directors within Leadership Corps, and a simple majority will uphold the firing decision. Article 6. The Executive Cabinet. The Executive Cabinet of ASPSU will be composed of voting members that will be composed of the President and Vice President, the SFC Chair, and the 8 Executive Directors that chair the Director-led committees. 6.2. The Executive Cabinet's non-voting membership will be composed of the Operations Director, the Publicity and Design Director, the Chief of Staff, the Judicial Review Board Chair, and its Vice Chair, the SFC Vice Chair, and the Student Trustee of PSU. 6.2.1. The SFC Vice Chair can only have a vote in cases where the SFC Chair is not present at the executive meetings. 6.3. The President or their designee shall preside over the Executive Cabinet. The Cabinet shall propose the agenda for each Senate meeting to the Senate Chair, approve expenditure requests from the ASPSU budget, and otherwise coordinate the day-to-day operations of ASPSU. 6.3.1. The Executive Cabinet has a responsibility to review and record the revised committee purpose that each committee submits annually. 6.4. The 8 executive directors that chair the director-led committees shall be appointed by the President. Article 7. The Senate. 7.1. The voting membership of the ASPSU Senate shall include the 7 SFC members and the 16 senators. 7.2. The non-voting members of the Senate are the President, the Vice President, the 8 executive directors that chair the director-led committees, the chair of the Judicial Review Board, the 4 associate justices of the Judicial Review Board, the Operations Director, the Publicity and Design Director, the Chief of Staff, the Student Trustee on the Board of Trustees of PSU, and a member of the faculty from the Faculty Senate of PSU. 7.3. Upon the passing of a resolution, the President or Vice President should connect with relevant stakeholders if stated, within 2 weeks of its passing, when applicable. 7.3.1. Resolutions that alter the administration of fee-funded areas do not take effect until the following year. 7.4. The ASPSU President shall have the power to veto any resolution passed by the Senate. 7.4.1. The President must submit a veto within 7 days of the resolution's passage to the Senate membership and must submit an official memorandum to the student body providing justification for this decision. 7.5. The ASPSU Senate shall have the power to override a presidential veto by a 2/3 vote of the voting membership. 7.5.1. In order to override the presidential veto, the Senate must conduct a vote at the following Senate meeting. If the Senate overrides the veto, it must notify the student body within 7 days of its decision through the ASPSU Vice President or an appointed senator. 7.6. The ASPSU Senate shall be responsible for the following: confirming nominations, approving the ASPSU budget, the incidental fee budget, resolutions, amendments to this Constitution, bylaws, guidelines and approving referrals and referenda, and any other matters that establish binding requirements upon ASPSU. 7.7. The Senate will be composed of 10 standing committees. These are the Executive Cabinet, the Student Fee Committee, and the 8 Director-led committees. 7.8. The Senate may issue binding line item changes to the proposed ASPSU budget by a 2/3 majority vote before it is submitted to the Student Fee Committee. 7.9. Except for the Executive Cabinet and the Student Fee Committee, each standing committee will be chaired by a corresponding director, titled a Director-led Committee, and will be composed of at least 2 and no more than 4 senators. Membership of the Executive Cabinet and Student Fee Committee are defined in Articles 6 and 8 respectively. 7.10. 7.10. The Vice President serves as the Speaker of the Senate and as the Senate Chair. At any time when the Vice President is not able to serve as Chair, the Senate pro tempore, as defined in Article 1.19, shall act as the interim Chair. 7.10.1. The Vice President can only vote in case of a tie and cannot make second motions. 7.10.2. The Senate pro tempore, when serving as interim Senate Chair, can only vote in the case of a tie and cannot make or second motions. 7.11. The Senate shall meet at least once every 2 weeks during the fall, winter, and spring academic quarters. 7.12. If at any time the total voting membership of the Senate falls below the minimum required for a quorum, the Senate may accept appointments for new Senate members from the President and approve them by a simple majority vote of the existing membership. 7.13. A special, also coined as emergency, Senate meeting may be called by the President, the Vice President, a majority vote of the Judicial Review Board, or by petition of a simple majority vote of the Senate's current voting membership. 7.14. All senators and Judicial Review Board members, excluding the Judicial Review Board Chair, are required to maintain membership on an All-University Committee, or AUC. 7.14.1. All AUC responsibilities shall be outlined in the Senate bylaws and the Judicial Review Board bylaws, respectively. Article 8. The Student Fee Committee. 8.1. The Student Fee Committee, or SFC, shall be the designated student government officials authorized to act on matters relating to the allocation, use, and appropriation of the student incidental fee and the student building fee. 8.2. The Student Fee Committee shall consist of 7 members. 8.3. The Student Fee Committee members will elect from among themselves a chair, according to the processes outlined in the most recent Student Fee Committee guidelines that have been approved by the ASPSU Senate and the President of PSU. 8.4. The Student Fee Committee guidelines from the previous fiscal year must remain in effect unless the following conditions are met. 8.4.1. The Student Fee Committee must submit to the ASPSU Senate any proposed revisions to the Student Fee Committee guidelines. The Senate may accept the proposed changes in whole, or may accept and/or reject individual proposed revisions. The revised Student Fee Committee guidelines must then be presented to the President of PSU for approval. 8.4.2. If the Student Fee Committee fails to present any proposed revisions to the Senate, or if the ASPSU Senate rejects the proposed Student Fee Committee guidelines, the previous year's guidelines must be recommended to the President of PSU for approval. 8.5. The term limit for an SFC member is 4 full-year terms of office, of which 2 terms are included within that term limit may be as specifically the SFC chair. Article 9. The Judicial Review Board. 9.1. The Judicial Review Board must rule on all questions of interpretation of this Constitution and all bylaws, guidelines, and job descriptions, and any governing documents subsidiary to it. 9.2. The Judicial Review Board must rule on appeals submitted by the members of the association. 9.3. The Judicial Review Board is responsible for overseeing all ASPSU elections. 9.4. The Judicial Review Board shall consist of 5 justices appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate by a simple majority vote. 9.4.1. If at any time the total voting membership of the Judicial Review Board falls below 4 members, they may conduct voting through a simple majority vote as opposed to that 4/5 majority, where applicable, and opposed to regular quorum requirements. 9.5. A Judicial Review Board chair, otherwise known as the Chief Justice, shall be elected by the membership of the Judicial Review Board. Such chair, who will be returning for the next academic year by a simple majority vote, after the first Senate meeting of the spring term and before the end of the spring term. 9.6. Justices of the Judicial Review Board may hold office as long as the requirements outlined in this Constitution are satisfied, for a maximum of 4 full-year ASPSU terms of office, subject to annual confirmation of the Senate during the spring academic quarter. 9.6.1. Justices wishing to continue in office shall submit a letter of intent to the Senate at the first Senate meeting of the spring academic quarter. 9.6.1.1. Justices who join or prospectively join ASPSU after the first Senate meeting of the spring academic quarter can submit their letter of intent to the Senate during the following Senate meeting, which would proceed after their confirmation Senate meetings. 9.6.2. The Senate shall review and confirm justices who have submitted letters of intent by the second meeting of the spring academic quarter. Confirmation requires no action, and dismissal requires a simple majority vote. 9.6.2.1. The Senate may only dismiss a justice of the Judicial Review Board with a cause. Cause for dismissal shall be synonymous with the definition of grounds for impeachment provided in Article 1.10. 9.6.2.2. The Senate must record the cause for dismissal in the official minutes of the Senate meeting. 9.6.3 The term of office for justices who do not submit a letter of intent shall end on May 31st of that spring academic quarter. 9.7 Any PSU student or incidental fee-funded department may submit an attention request to the Judicial Review Board. 9.8 If at least a 4/5 majority of the Judicial Review Board agree that there are grounds for impeachment, the justices shall write letters of impeachment and forward them to the Senate for trial. 9.9 The Judicial Review Board shall determine if vacancies in any elected or appointed positions 9.9 The Judicial Review Board shall determine if vacancies in any elected or appointed positions exist and declare all vacancies specified in this Constitution. 9.10 The Judicial Review Board shall hear cases and review all dismissals of directors from director-led committees and executive staff positions. Cause for dismissal shall be synonymous with the definition of grounds for impeachment provided in Article 1.10. 9.11 The Senate may overturn a ruling of the Judicial Review Board if all of the following requirements are met. 9.11.1 The Senate must identify at least one flaw in the Judicial Review Board ruling in order for the ruling to be set aside. 9.11.2 The ruling's faults must be cited in the form of a resolution introduced to the Senate no later than 2 scheduled Senate meetings after the ruling has been posted. 9.11.3 The resolution must pass by a 3/4 majority vote. 9.11.4 The Senate cannot overturn a ruling made during the prior ASPSU term of office. 9.12 The Judicial Review Board shall write opinions on all rulings which shall take effect as soon as they are available to the public, unless a later time is specified in the ruling. Dissenting justices shall write at least one dissenting opinion, which shall also be made available to the public. 9.13 The Judicial Review Board shall present to the Senate an informational review of the Constitution at the second Senate meeting of the fall term. 9.13.1 All new members joining after the fall term will be required to meet with the Chief of Staff within the first month of appointment to review all governing documents, their job responsibilities, G-Suite, which includes the ASPSU Google Drives and Gmails, and any other relevant training materials. Article 10. Elections. 10.1 The Judicial Review Board shall be responsible for overseeing all ASPSU elections. The elections shall be managed by the Elections Committee, a subcommittee of the Judicial Review Board. 10.2 The following ASPSU positions will be elected by a popular vote of the students of PSU. 10.2.1 President and Vice President. 10.2.2 7 Student Fee Committee members. 10.2.3 16 Senators. 10.3 The annual ASPSU elections shall conclude by the end of the last full week of the month of May. 10.4. The Judicial Review Board shall be responsible for revising the Elections Committee bylaws and Elections Manual, subject to the Senate's approval. 10.5. The Executive Cabinet, in collaboration with the Judicial Review Board, shall be responsible for advertising and recruiting candidates for the elections. 10.5.1. Executive Cabinet members who are on the ASPSU Election Committee cannot endorse candidates for the ASPSU elections. 10.6. The Judicial Review Board shall recommend to the Senate for approval whether the President or Vice Presidential ticket shall be elected by a plurality of the votes or by instant runoff voting. The recommendation shall be submitted to the Senate no later than December 31st and may be accepted by a simple majority vote. 10.7. Further election guidelines can be found in the current year's election manual and election committee bylaws. Article 11. General Assembly. 11.1. At least once every academic term, excluding the summer term, ASPSU must host a General Assembly open to the entire student body. 11.2. During this public forum, the public is invited to, but not limited to, ask questions, provide comments, and propose resolutions for the ASPSU Senate to deliberate at the next scheduled Senate meeting. 11.2.1. At this Senate meeting, these resolutions must be brought forth to the Senate in the form of a motion by voting members before they may be deliberated. 11.3. This public forum will be chaired by a designee determined by the Executive Committee. Article 12. Resignation, recall, impeachment, and replacement. 12.1. Vacancies occur through resignation, recall, seat vacancy, firing, or impeachment. Interpretation of all governing documents and what constitutes a vacancy may be further delineated by the Judicial Review Board. 12.2. Except for the position of President, Executive Staff, and Committee Directors, appointments to vacant positions shall be nominated by the President, subject to confirmation of the Senate by a simple majority vote. 12.2.1. The Student Fee Committee may appoint an interim SFC member from the body if a vacancy goes unfilled for greater than 2 weeks, by a majority vote of 2/3 of current SFC membership, in order to avoid undue disruption to regular SFC business. The interim SFC member shall not have voting rights in any ASPSU body, including inside the SFC, until approved by the Senate. Interim SFC members will still be required to fulfill the duties of a non-interim SFC member. Due to the urgent nature of the business at the SFC, the Student Fee Committee is a purview. SFC members can be voted in at any time during the year through a special Senate meeting by a simple majority of voting members in attendance. 12.3. If the President's position is vacated, the Vice President shall assume the office of President. 12.4. If the position of Vice President is vacated, the President shall nominate a current ASPSU officer to become the new Vice President, subject to confirmation of the Senate by a simple majority vote. 12.5. If both the positions of the President and Vice President are vacated, the Chair of the Judicial Review Board shall serve as interim President until the next scheduled Senate meeting. 12.5.1. The Senate shall elect a President from within its voting members, who will replace the interim President for the remainder of the term of office at the next scheduled Senate meeting with a simple majority vote. 12.5.2. Once an interim President is selected, the Judicial Review Board Chair will resume the responsibilities of chairing the Judicial Review Board. 12.6. Any PSU student may submit an attention request concerning a student officer to the Judicial Review Board, which shall determine if the attention request constitutes grounds for impeachment. 12.6.1. The Judicial Review Board Chair, in collaboration with the Publicity Director, will work to increase the visibility of this process through advertising on the ASPSU website, regular email communications to the student body, and through promotion at town hall forums. 12.7. The Judicial Review Board shall only publish articles of impeachment with a 4/5 majority vote, after which the articles shall be forwarded to the Senate for a public hearing. 12.7.1. Should the accused officer be a member of the Judicial Review Board, grounds and articles of impeachment shall be determined by an ad hoc committee composed of 4 Senate members and a Judicial Review Board member who is not the subject of the inquest. The President will recommend this ad hoc committee and is confirmed by the Senate by a simple majority vote. 12.7.2. The Senate may remove the accused officer with a 3/4 majority vote. 12.7.3. The Judicial Review Board shall review and decide upon the procedure of the Senate, all impeachment processes, and validity after the case has been decided. 12.8. The members of the PSU student body may recall any elected official by a majority vote in accordance with the following procedures. 12.8.1. Upon request, the President will provide members of the PSU student body with a copy of the official ASPSU recall petition form. The ASPSU recall petition form will contain fields for the petitioner to provide the names of the officers to be recalled, their positions, the reasons for the recall, and the names of all persons initiating the recall petition. The Judicial Review Board must review a completed recall before the recall can proceed. 12.8.2. Once a recall form has been completed and approved, the petitioners will have 30 calendar days to collect the names, PSU email addresses, and PSU ID numbers of at least 1% of the student body based on what is reflected in what is most recently published on the PSU website. 12.8.3. The Judicial Review Board must review the validity of the PSU logins after the petition has been submitted. Upon validation of the petition, the President must call a special election. 12.9. Those removed from office by impeachment or through being fired by the ASPSU President as defined in Article 1.6, which is upheld by the Judicial Review Board, must file an attention request to be considered for eligibility for ASPSU membership with a 4/5 majority vote of the Judicial Review Board if they wish to return as an ASPSU member at any time. 12.10. Those removed from office due to academic ineligibility will not be eligible to hold office in ASPSU for the following academic quarter. 12.11. Those who resign from office for any other reason than impeachment, presidential dismissal, as defined in Article 1.6, ineligibility, or other special reasons as defined within the Constitution, remain eligible to hold office in ASPSU. 12.11.1. Those who resign from office after having articles of impeachment filed against them, which are known as pre-impeachment resignation, shall be ineligible to hold office in ASPSU for 1 full calendar year from the date of pre-impeachment resignation. 12.11.2. Once an officer of ASPSU resigns, pending impeachment trials concerning them cannot proceed. 12.11.3. If a former officer of ASPSU resigned after articles of impeachment were filed against them, they must file an attention request to be considered for eligibility for ASPSU membership, which is subject to approval through a 4/5 majority vote of the Judicial Review Board. Such an attention request may only be submitted after at least 1 full calendar year of ineligibility following their resignation, as per Article 12.11.1. 12.12. Resignations by any ASPSU officer become effective upon delivery, in writing or email communication to the President, the Vice President, the Chief of Staff, the ASPSU advisor, or by a recognized verbal statement within any official meeting of ASPSU. Resignations by ASPSU members which do not specify an end date default to immediate vacancies and require no actions by the Judicial Review Board. 12.12.1. The President must announce their resignation to the Senate in written or verbal form. 12.12.2. The Vice President must announce their resignation to the President in written or verbal form. 12.13. All other vacancies become effective upon the Judicial Review Board's decision, as issued in a majority opinion made available to the public, or through a Senate impeachment trial decision. Article 13. Initiative and Referendum. 13.1. Referenda may be placed on the ballot by being voted upon by the Senate through a simple majority vote or by a petition from the student body. 13.2. Except as otherwise specified in the Constitution, in order to qualify for the ballot, an initiative petition must contain the valid signatures of at least 3% of the student body, as tabulated in the most recent Fall Quarter FTE report of the Office of Institutional Research and Planning. 13.3. Before any initiative petition may be circulated, or before the Senate may consider referring a referendum to the ballot, the language of any initiatives or referendum must be approved by the Judicial Review Board. The language must be clear, objective, and not designed to unduly persuade voters. 13.4. Programs proposing to be funded from incidental fees must meet the eligibility requirements as stated in the Student Fee Committee guidelines, and may not be created or funded through the initiative and referendum process. Article 14. Amendments. 14.1. This Constitution may only be substantively amended or appealed and replaced through a referral to the annual ASPSU election ballot. The student body may only approve such referendums if the election yields a 2% turnout, as tabulated in the most recent Fall Quarter FTE report of the Office of Institutional Research and Planning. Once approved, it takes effect on June 1st of that year, or preceding year if the date is passed, unless otherwise specified in the referendum's language. 14.1. The Constitution Review Workgroup, which functions as a standing subcommittee of the Judicial Review Board, is the only body that may propose constitutional amendments to the ASPSU Senate. 14.2. In order to qualify for the ballot, an initiative petition to amend or replace this Constitution must contain the valid signatures of at least 3% of the student body, as tabulated in the most recent Fall Quarter FTE report of the Office of Institutional Research and Planning. The petition must be submitted 1 week before the ballot is finalized. 14.3. All amendments must be voted on separately in the elections, unless otherwise stated in this Constitution, or as voted on by the Senate to appear on the ballot. 14.4. The Senate may adopt through 2/3 majority vote non-substantive changes to this Constitution that preserve its intent or bring it in compliance with current law. The Judicial Review Board will determine whether a proposed or adopted change is non-substantive. 14.4. The Judicial Review Board, in collaboration with the Constitutional Review Workgroup, must outline a process that delineates what is considered non-substantive and what is considered substantive by the third Senate meeting of the fall term. This has been the Associated Students of Portland State University's Constitution as of academic 2022 to 2023. Have a wonderful day.